3 days before the wedding, my father called me a stain on his perfect image. He wanted a fairy tale without the daughter who cleans up underworld messes. So I disappeared. But when a live stream showed his perfect groom screaming our family secrets to the world, my phone rang. They didn't call the police. They called the stain they tried to hide. I didn't answer to take orders. I answered to name my price. My name is Harper Whitmore, and I specialize in the kind of silence that saves lives. Most people are terrified of silence. They fill it with nervous laughter, with useless apologies, with lies they think will protect them. I do not. I let the silence sit in the room like a physical weight until the person on the other side breaks under it. 72 hours after my father politely evicted me from my own family. I was standing in a dusty, sun-baked room in a fictional border town that did not officially exist on any tourist map. This was a training simulation facility for Sentinel Solutions, but the stakes felt real enough. The man across from me was sweating. He was an actor, a very good one, hired to play a desperate cartel lieutenant holding 2 aid workers hostage. He was screaming, waving a modified pistol, his eyes darting toward the window where my sniper team would be positioned in a real scenario. I stood 4 feet away from him. I was not wearing body armor. I was wearing a charcoal blazer and jeans, my hands visible, empty, and steady. "They are going to breach," he shouted, spit flying. "I will kill her. I swear I will kill her." "No one is breaching, Marco," I said. My voice was low, flat, devoid of judgment. It was the voice of a machine that had calculated the odds and found them favorable. "The perimeter is cold. It is just you and me. Look at my hands. I am not a threat to you. I am the only person here who wants you to walk out of this alive." He hesitated. That was the micro-expression I was waiting for, the split second of doubt where survival instinct overrides rage. In my line of work, we call that the golden window. I didn't rush it. I didn't plead. I simply held his gaze, my face a mask of professional indifference. I counted the beats of his pulse visible in his neck. 1, 2, 3. "Put the gun on the table," I said. It wasn't a question. "We walk out. You get a lawyer. You live to see tomorrow." He lowered the weapon. The simulation buzzer sounded, loud and jarring. The actor slumped, wiping sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand, and the evaluation team stepped in from the shadows of the observation deck. My handler, a gray-haired ex-CI, a operative named Reynolds, nodded at me. It was the only praise I ever received, and the only praise I needed. "Cold as ice, Whitmore," Reynolds said. "Heart rate never went above 60. I unclipped my microphone and walked out into the blinding artificial light of the corridor. I was good at this. I was exceptional at this. I could de-escalate a psychotic break, negotiate a ransom, or extract a high-value target from a hostile zone without a single shot being fired. I was a ghost in the machine of global chaos, a cleaner for messes that governments preferred to ignore. But apparently, I wasn't qualified to drink champagne at a country club in Washington, D.C. I went back to the locker room to change, and as I pulled my tactical shirt over my head, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. There was a thin, pale line running along my left jawline, a souvenir from a negotiation in Beirut that had gone south 5 years ago. It was barely visible in good lighting, but to my father, Senator Whitmore, it was a canyon. It was a visible reminder that his eldest daughter dealt in violence, while his youngest, Chloe, dealt in smiles. My mind drifted back to the meeting in his study 3 days ago. The air in the senator's home office always smelled the same old paper, expensive scotch, and the metallic tang of ambition. It was a room designed to intimidate. The heavy oak desk was positioned so that anyone sitting across from it had to look slightly up at him. I sat in the leather visitor's chair, my back straight, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't fidget. I treated this meeting with the same operational discipline I treated a hostage crisis. "Harper," my father said. He didn't look up from the file he was reading immediately. It was a power move. He wanted me to wait. "Thank you for coming." "You said it was urgent," I replied. He finally looked at me. He was a handsome man, aging with the grace that only wealth can buy. Silver hair, perfectly tailored suit, a flag pin on his lapel that probably cost more than my first car. But his eyes were hard. They were the eyes of a man checking poll numbers. "It is about the wedding," he said. I assumed as much. "I picked up my dress from the tailor yesterday. Navy blue, high collar. It covers the scars." He winced. It was a small twitch at the corner of his mouth. But I saw it. He hated when I mentioned the reality of my life. He preferred to pretend I was a consultant for a logistics firm. "That is actually what I wanted to talk to you about," he said, leaning back. "I have had a conversation with Julian." Julian, the groom, the golden boy of the tech world, a CEO at 30, who had charmed half of Washington with his startup rhetoric and his dazzling smile. I had profiled him the moment I met him. Narcissistic tendencies, low empathy, high need for control. He was a textbook sociopath in a designer suit. But my father saw him as the son he never had. "And I asked, "Julian is concerned," my father said carefully. "He feels that your presence at the wedding might be a distraction." I didn't blink. "A distraction? How so?" "It is the atmosphere. Harper," my father said, his voice taking on that reasonable, condescending tone he used on televised debates. "This wedding is going to be high profile. There will be press. There will be donors. Julian's family is very particular about their image. They are uncomfortable with your background." "My background keeps people safe," I said. "Your background frightens people," he corrected. "You have a hardness about you. Harper, you sit in a room and you scan the exits. You look at people like you are assessing them for threats. It makes the guests nervous. It makes Julian nervous." "Julian is nervous because I see through him," I said. "Enough," my father snapped. The mask slipped for a second. "This is not about your paranoia. This is about Chloe. This is her day. She is the bride. She is soft. She is radiant. She is perfect. She is a swan. Harper, and you are a wolf. You don't put a wolf in a room full of crystal glass and expect people to relax." The comparison hung in the air. Swan and wolf. It was cruel, but it was accurate. Chloe had followed the script. She went to the right prep schools, joined the right sorority, volunteered at the right charities. She was the asset. I was the liability. I was the dark secret they kept on the periphery, useful only when they needed something unpleasant handled quietly. "So you are disinviting me," I said. I stripped the emotion out of my voice. I made it a statement of fact. "I am asking you to do the right thing for this family," he said, smoothing his tie. "We will say you were called away on urgent business overseas. Sentinel Solutions sent you to a classified location. It sounds mysterious. It sounds heroic. It keeps you away from the cameras." I looked at him, really looked at him. I looked for a flicker of regret, a hint of paternal instinct that might rebel against casting out his own flesh and blood to please a tech bro son-in-law. I saw nothing. I saw a politician managing a risk. "Does Chloe know?" I asked. "Chloe understands that everything we do is for her future," he said. That was a non-answer, which meant he had bulldozed her into agreeing. I stood up. I didn't slam my hand on the desk. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me hurt. In my world, emotion is a weakness that gets you killed. "Understood," I said. "I will be gone by tomorrow morning." "It is for the best," he said, relieved. He reached for his checkbook. "I can cover your travel expenses, a vacation, perhaps somewhere warm." "Keep your money," I said. "Consider it my wedding gift." I walked out of that office and I didn't look back. Now, back in the locker room at the training facility, I finished buttoning my flannel shirt. I had kept my word. I had returned to my apartment in Arlington only long enough to pack a go-bag. My apartment was nothing like the family estate. It was a sterile, efficient space on the 12th floor of a secure building. No family photos, no plants, just 3 monitors on a desk, a high-end server rack in the closet. and a gun safe by the bed. I had looked at the invitations sitting on my counter: cream cardstock, gold embossed lettering, Miss Harper Whitmore. It looked like a prop from a play I wasn't cast in. I dropped it into the shredder. The sound of the paper tearing was the only noise in the apartment. I wasn't just staying away, I was vanishing. I had requested a remote assignment from Sentinel, monitoring a low-risk asset in the Colorado mountains. A safe house, isolation. It was perfect. I needed to be somewhere where the air was thin and cold, somewhere that didn't smell of wedding cake and betrayal. My phone buzzed on the bench next to me. It was a text from Chloe. "Please don't be mad at Dad. I am so sorry. Harper, I tried to tell Julian that I wanted you there, but he got so intense. He said it would ruin the vibe. I don't dare argue with him when he gets like that. I just want everything to be peaceful. I love you." I stared at the screen. "I don't dare argue with him." That was the line that stuck. Chloe wasn't just a swan. She was a bird in a cage, and she was too terrified to realize the door was locked. Julian wasn't just protecting his image, he was isolating her. That was step one in the abuser's playbook. Isolate the victim from the strong family members, the ones who might fight back. I typed out a reply, then deleted it. There was nothing I could say. If I pushed, she would retreat. If I warned her, she would tell Julian, and he would use it to paint me as the jealous, unstable sister. I deleted the thread. "Reynolds," I called out as I walked past the ops center. "I am going dark. Protocol Ghost. If the world burns down in the next 48 hours, don't call me unless the fire is at my front door." "Copy that, Whitmore," Reynolds said, not looking up from his screens. "Enjoy the silence." I walked out into the heat of the parking lot, threw my duffel bag into the back of my black SUV, and put on my sunglasses. I was exiled, banned, erased. My father thought he had solved his problem. He thought that by removing the wolf, he had ensured the safety of his sheep. He was a fool. You don't ban the wolf to protect the sheep. You keep the wolf close, because the wolf is the only thing that knows how to kill the monsters that come in the night. I started the engine. The dashboard clock read 1,000 hours. The wedding was in 2 days. I would be 2,000 miles away, buried in snow and silence, while they toasted to their perfect, fragile lie. "Ghost mode initiated," I said to the voice interface of my car. The GPS locked onto the coordinates for the Colorado safe house. The phone signal cut out as I disabled the transponder. I drove away, leaving Washington, D.C. to its fate. I felt a strange sense of calm. I had done my duty. I had followed orders. I was the good soldier. I just didn't know yet that the war was going to follow me home. The silence of the Colorado Rockies was absolute. It was not the tense, holding your breath silence of a negotiation room, nor was it the heavy, suffocating silence of my father's study. It was indifferent. The snow fell in thick, heavy sheets outside the reinforced glass of the safe house. Burying the world in white, I was sitting at a rough-hewn wooden table, a mug of black coffee cooling near my right hand, and a high-powered spotting scope positioned to my left. My assignment was simple: monitor a cabin 3 miles down the ridge. The target was a whistleblower who had fled a cartel trial in Mexico. My job was not to interact, but to exist as a failsafe. If the bad guys showed up, I was the surprise waiting in the tree line. But for the last 24 hours, the only movement I had seen was a herd of elk moving sluggishly through the deep drifts. It was boring. It was cold. It was exactly what I had asked for. I checked my watch. It was 2 in the afternoon. Mountain time. That made it 4 in the afternoon in Washington, D.C. The ceremony would be over. The reception would be in full swing. By now, the speeches were likely finishing. My father would be raising a glass of vintage champagne, delivering a carefully rehearsed toast about love, legacy, and the bright future of the Whitmore dynasty. Chloe would be smiling that soft, practiced smile, her hand resting delicately on Julian's arm. The cameras would be flashing, capturing the perfect tableau of American success. I told myself I did not care. I told myself that I was better off here, where the air was clean and the threats were honest. But curiosity is a persistent itch, and I am only human. I reached for my iPad. I had sworn to stay dark. I had initiated ghost mode, but accessing the public internet through a localized, encrypted VPN would not compromise my location. I just wanted to see a picture. Just one. I wanted to see the dress. I wanted to see if Chloe looked happy, or if she looked like she was drowning in tulle and expectations. I opened the browser and navigated to the trending news tab. I expected to see political headlines, or perhaps a fluff piece on the wedding of the season. I did not see that. What I saw made the blood freeze in my veins, colder than the air outside. The #1 trending topic in the United States was not Whitmore wedding or Julian and Chloe. It was wedding war zone. I stared at the screen. The hashtag was climbing vertically, gaining thousands of interactions every few seconds. My stomach dropped. This was not a cute nickname for a rowdy party. This was the internet's label for a disaster. I clicked the tag. The first result was a video. It had been uploaded 12 minutes ago and already had 2 million views. The thumbnail was a blur of motion, but I could make out a tuxedo and a shattered floral centerpiece. I pressed play. The sound hit me first. It was a chaotic wall of noise shrieks, the crash of breaking china, and a man's voice screaming at a pitch that shredded the speaker's audio limits. The camera work was amateur, filmed vertically on a phone by a guest who was clearly hiding behind a table. The frame shook violently, but the subject was unmistakable. Julian. He was standing on the head table, the centerpiece of my father's meticulously planned reception. Draped in Italian linen and covered in orchids imported from Singapore, Julian was stomping on it. His tie was gone. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, revealing sweat-slicked skin. His face, usually so composed and handsome in magazines, was a contorted mask of purple rage. He looked demonic. "Turn it off!" Julian screamed. He wound up and hurled something heavy. It looked like a microphone stand into the string quartet. There was a sickening crunch of wood as a cello was obliterated. The camera jerked as the person filming flinched. "Don't you dare look at me like that!" Julian bellowed, spinning around to point a finger at someone off-screen. The camera panned slightly, and I saw my father. Senator Whitmore was standing near the cake, his face drained of all color. He looked like a statue made of ash. His mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. He was watching his political capital burn to the ground in real time. "You think you are better than me?" Julian shouted, kicking a silver tureen of soup off the table. It splashed onto the front row of guest donors. I realized, major campaign donors. "You sit there with your flag pin and your moral high ground. You hypocrite. You pathetic, lying hypocrite." The audio cracked as Julian's voice peaked. "You sold her to me." I stopped breathing. The words hung in the air, echoing through the speakers of my iPad in the silent cabin. Julian wasn't finished. He stumbled, almost slipping on the wet tablecloth, then regained his balance with a manic laugh. He looked down at where Chloe must have been sitting. "And you?" he sneered. The camera finally found my sister. Chloe was huddled in her chair, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. Her perfect white dress was stained with wine and soup. She looked tiny. She looked like a child who had been caught in a war zone. "Look at you," Julian spat. "Crying again. That is all you do. Cry and smile. You are useless. Do you know that you are a doll, a hollow, plastic, expensive doll that costs too much money to maintain?" The crowd gasped. It was a collective sound of horror, but no one moved. No one stepped in. The security detail was likely frozen, unsure if they were allowed to tackle the groom at his own wedding. My father's staff were probably paralyzed by the PR nightmare unfolding before their eyes. Julian grabbed a bottle of champagne by the neck. He didn't drink from it. He smashed the base of it against the table edge, turning it into a jagged glass weapon. "I did the deal," Julian screamed, swinging the broken bottle toward my father. "I signed the papers, the zoning rights for the Arlington project. That was me. I bailed out your debt so you could keep your seat in the Senate, and this is the thanks I get. You look at me with disgust. My tactical mind kicked into overdrive. Zoning rights. Arlington Project. Debt. He had just confessed to a felony. He had just implicated a sitting United States senator in a quid pro quo bribery scheme involving a land development deal. And he had done it on a live stream that was being watched by half the country. This wasn't just a meltdown. This was a nuclear detonation. I watched Julian's eyes in the video. They were wide, unblinking, and vacant. I had seen that look before. I had seen it in the eyes of a dictator in a bunker as his regime collapsed. I had seen it in a cornered bank robber who realized the getaway car wasn't coming. It was narcissistic collapse. Julian lived in a reality where he was a god untouchable, perfect, worshipped. Something today had cracked that mirror. Maybe a guest had slighted him. Maybe things hadn't gone exactly to his script. When the fantasy fails for a man like Julian, the result isn't sadness, it is rage. It is a desperate, violent attempt to destroy the reality that dares to contradict him. He was not drunk. He was psychotic. "I own you," Julian roared, pointing the jagged glass at the terrified guests. "I own all of you." The video cut to black. The person filming had likely run or been spotted. I sat back in my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. The silence of the cabin rushed back in. But it felt different now. It felt heavy. I wasn't smiling. There was no "I told you so" on my lips. You don't gloat when a bomb goes off. You check for casualties. And the casualties here were catastrophic. My father's career was over. The family reputation was incinerated. But worse, Chloe was in that room with a man holding a weaponized bottle. A man who had just realized he had nothing left to lose. A narcissist in collapse is the most dangerous creature on earth. He would punish the nearest object for his humiliation. And the nearest object was my sister. My eyes shifted to the black rectangle of my encrypted phone sitting on the table. It had been silent for 2 days. Suddenly, the screen lit up. The vibration against the wood sounded like a drill. "Incoming call, Dad." I stared at it. The phone stopped ringing. 2 seconds later, it lit up again. "Incoming call, Dad." Then a text message notification flashed on the iPad. Linked to my emergency number. "Dad, answer the phone. Dad, emergency. Dad, he has a gun. Dad, where are you?" The calls started stacking up. 10 missed calls in the span of 1 minute. The desperate flailing of a man drowning. I looked at the snow falling outside. It was peaceful. It was safe. I could stay here. I could let the phone ring. I could watch the fallout from a distance. Secure in the knowledge that I had been banned, that this was not my mess to clean up. My father had made his choice. He had chosen the swan and exiled the wolf. But the wolf knows something the swan does not. The wolf knows that when the predator bares its teeth, you do not hide your eyes. You lunge. I reached out and placed my hand on the phone. The metal was cold. The vibration was relentless. I did not slide the answer bar. Not yet. I let it ring. I let the fear build on the other end of the line. I needed them to understand the depth of their error. I needed them to understand that the silence they had forced upon me was now the only thing they were begging to break. The screen flashed again. Dad. He was not calling a daughter. He was calling a weapon. I took a sip of my cold coffee, my eyes fixed on the name flashing on the screen, and I began to calculate the flight time from Colorado to Washington, D.C. I watched the phone vibrate across the rough grain of the wooden table. It was a rhythmic, desperate dance. Buzz, slide, buzz, slide. My father's name flashed and faded. Flashed and faded. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I stood up and walked to the small kitchenette. I needed fresh coffee. The simple domestic act of grinding beans and pouring water felt almost subversive given the chaos I knew was unfolding 2,000 miles away. As the aroma of dark roast filled the cold air of the cabin, I looked out at the tree line. The snow was falling harder now, erasing the world in layers of white. It was a blank slate, a fresh start, something my family would never have again. I took my mug and sat back down, not in front of the phone, but angled away from it, staring at the screen of my laptop. I knew exactly what was happening in that ballroom. I didn't need a live stream to see it. I could profile the panic. My father wasn't hyperventilating because his daughter was in danger. He was hyperventilating because the Whitmore name, a brand he had spent 40 years polishing until it gleamed like a weapon, was being dragged through the mud. He was thinking about polls. He was thinking about the ethics committee investigation that would inevitably follow Julian's drunken confession. He was thinking about how to spin this. Crisis management, he would call it. Spin control. But you can't spin a narcissist with a broken bottle. You can't negotiate with gravity while you are falling. The phone buzzed again. A new name this time. Eleanor, my stepmother. I let it go to voicemail. Then the text arrived. Eleanor, please. Harper. He is destroying the reception hall. He threw a chair through the antique mirror. Your father is clutching his chest. I think he is having a heart attack. You have to do something. I took a sip of coffee. Do something. It was always the command. Fix it. Hide it. Clean it. He is having a heart attack, I murmured to the empty room. Or is he having a panic attack because he realized he sold his soul for a bounced check? I turned to my Sentinel Solutions workstation. This was not a consumer laptop. It was a ruggedized field unit with direct uplink to the firm's private intelligence servers. I didn't need Facebook anymore. Facebook was for the audience. I needed the script. I typed in Julian Thorne. Publicly, Julian was a tech visionary, a disruptor, a 30-year-old wunderkind with a portfolio of AI startups and a smile that made venture capitalists open their wallets. Privately, according to the Level 4 database that Sentinel accessed via backdoors in offshore banking regulators, Julian was a hollow shell. I scrolled through the financial reports. The numbers were red, deep, arterial red. His flagship company, Thorne Dynamics, had not turned a profit in 18 months. He was leveraging debt to pay off other debt. It was a classic Ponzi structure, wrapped in Silicon Valley buzzwords. But there was more. I found a flagged file from the Securities and Exchange Commission. It was a sealed investigation into wire fraud. He is broke, I said softly. It made perfect sense. The desperation, the marriage to a political family. He didn't love Chloe. He needed cover. He needed the Whitmore connections to secure government contracts, to get the zoning rights my father had apparently traded, to keep his house of cards standing for just one more fiscal quarter. And today, something had tipped it over. Maybe a creditor called, maybe a loan was denied, and the stress fracture in his psyche had snapped. I clicked on another tab. Psychological profile. Automated assessment based on public behavior. The Sentinel algorithm churned for a second and spat out a probability graph. High probability of Machiavellianism. High probability of narcissistic personality disorder. Volatility index critical. He is not just a con man, I whispered. He is a cornered animal. The phone rang again. This time, the name on the screen stopped my hand mid-air. Chloe. The vibration sounded different this time. Less angry, more fragile. I looked at the timer on the screen. It had been ringing for 10 seconds. I put down my coffee mug. I took a breath, centering myself, pushing the anger and the resentment into a small, locked box in the back of my mind. I was not the sister anymore. I was the operator. I tapped the green icon and brought the phone to my ear. I did not speak. Silence is a tool. It forces the other person to fill the void with truth. For 3 seconds, there was only the sound of ragged, wet breathing. Someone was crying so hard they couldn't inhale. Harper. The voice was tiny. It sounded like she was curled into a ball. I could hear a faint echo tiles. She was in a bathroom. I didn't answer. I waited. Harper, are you there? Chloe sobbed. Please, I don't know who else to call. Mom is crying. Dad is just sitting there. He won't look at me. I am here, I said. My voice was calm, low, steady, an anchor in the storm. He is crazy. Harper, she whispered. He is outside the door. He is screaming at the guests to leave. But he won't let us leave. He says if I try to walk out, he will burn the house down. He says he has files on Dad. He says he will ruin us. Where are you exactly? I asked. The bridal suite bathroom. I locked the door. I can hear him throwing things in the hallway. Is anyone with you? No, I am alone. Where is Dad? He is in the main hall. Julian hit him. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. He hit Dad. He shoved him. Dad fell. He hit his head on the table. He is bleeding. Harper. And he just sat there. He didn't fight back. He looked terrified, not of Julian, but of what Julian was saying. Of course, my father would take a physical blow to protect a political secret. Chloe, listen to me, I said. I am scared, she whimpered. He has a gun. I saw it in his waistband when he took off his jacket. It is silver. He showed it to me before the speeches started. He said it was for protection against the haters. But the way he looked at me, a gun. The equation shifted instantly. This wasn't a domestic dispute anymore. This wasn't a PR crisis. This was a hostage situation with an armed, unstable subject in a deteriorating mental state. Harper, why aren't you here? She cried. Why did you leave me? The accusation cut deep, but I deflected it. I didn't leave you. Chloe, I was removed, but that doesn't matter now. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto the snowy landscape outside as if I could see through the miles to the terrified girl in the bathroom. I need you to stop crying, I said. Can you do that for me? I can't. You can? Take a breath. Hold it for 4 seconds. Exhale for 4 seconds. Do it. I waited. I heard her shaky intake of breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale. Good, I said. Now, I am going to ask you a question, and I need a precise answer. This is the most important question I will ever ask you. Okay. Are you injured? What? Are you hurt, Chloe? Did he touch you? Are you bleeding? No, she sniffed. He grabbed my arm, but I pulled away. I am okay, physically. Good. Stay in the bathroom. Do not unlock the door for anyone unless you hear my voice or the voice of a police officer. Do you understand? Police. Her voice spiked with panic. No. Dad said no police. He said it would make it worse. He said if the sirens come, Julian will release the emails. He said we have to handle this in the family. I closed my eyes. Even with a concussion and a gun in the room, my father was still trying to campaign. He was willing to gamble his daughter's life against a folder of emails. Dad is not in charge anymore, I said. My voice was ice. He forfeited his command when he let a predator into the house. Harper, what are you going to do? I am going to work, I said. Keep your phone silent. Text me if he tries to breach the door. Do not engage with him. If he talks to you through the door, do not answer. You are a ghost. Chloe, be invisible. Harper, I am coming, I said. Hang up. I ended the call. I stared at the phone for 1 second, letting the anger crystallize into focus. Then I picked it up and dialed my father. He answered on the first ring. Harper. He sounded breathless, weak. You have to help me. The press. They are outside the gates. We can't let them in. You have contacts, right? You have people who can make things disappear. Make things disappear, I repeated. You want a cleanup crew. I want containment, he hissed. Julian is hysterical. We just need to calm him down. Get him to sign an NDA. Get him out the back door. We can spin the video. We can say it was a medical episode, a reaction to medication, but we cannot have an arrest record, not with the election cycle starting in 3 months. He has a gun, Dad. Silence. You knew, I said. It is licensed, he stammered. He has a concealed carry permit. It is legal. He is brandishing a firearm while intoxicated and making threats of arson and violence, I said. That is not legal. That is a felony, and you are obstructing justice by not calling 911. You don't understand the stakes. I understand the stakes perfectly, I said. The stakes are Chloe's life, and you are betting it against your poll numbers. Don't you lecture me, he snapped, trying to regain his authority. I am your father. I am telling you to come here and fix this quietly. Use your skills. Neutralize him. But no police. No FBI. Do you hear me? I looked at the snow. It was so clean, so pure. I hear you, I said. I am activating my team. Good, he exhaled. Good girl. Hurry. I hung up. Then I opened the Sentinel secure comms channel. Reynolds, I said when the line clicked open. Go ahead. Whitmore? I have a code red situational update. Hostage scenario. High-value target involved. Armed subject. Volatile. Location. Washington, D.C. Private residence. Copy. Who is the client? The client, I said. Is me? I stood up and walked to the gun safe. I punched in the code. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside lay my go bag. Pre-packed for extraction. I wasn't going to fix this quietly. I wasn't going to make it disappear. I was going to blow it wide open. My father wanted a cleaner. Too bad. He was getting a soldier. I dialed my father's number again. It was time to set the terms of engagement. He answered instantly, his voice cracking with a mix of fury and panic. Where are you? I told you to hurry. The press is climbing the perimeter fence. Stop, I said. The word was not loud, but it was absolute. It was the command voice I used to freeze a room full of armed men. What? He sputtered. Harper, you listen to me. No, Senator, I interrupted, stripping him of the title, Dad, and replacing it with the formal distance he deserved. You listen to me. 3 days ago, you issued a standing order. You banned me from the property. You told me my presence was a liability. That order stands. I am currently 2,000 miles away, adhering to your instructions. Are you insane? He shouted. This is an emergency. Forget what I said. I don't forget orders, I replied coldly. I follow them, unless new orders are issued, and right now, I am not hearing a request for help. I am hearing a man shouting at the only person who can save him. There was a silence on the line, heavy, stunned. For the first time in 29 years, the power dynamic in the Whitmore family shifted. He was no longer the patriarch holding the purse strings. He was a civilian in a war zone. And I was the extraction team. Harper, he said, his voice dropping, trembling. Please. Tell me the situation, I said. Operational facts only. No spin. He took a ragged breath. He is in the ballroom. He has locked the main doors. The guests. Most of them got out the side exits when he started smashing the mirrors. But he has leverage. What kind of leverage? He has the servers, my father whispered. The private servers for the campaign. They were in the library adjacent to the ballroom. He dragged them in there. He says if anyone comes in, he puts a bullet in the hard drives, and then he puts the backups on the internet. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course, it wasn't just about Chloe. It was never just about Chloe. It was about the data, the dirty laundry. And Chloe? I asked. She is somewhere in the house. I don't know exactly. He says if she leaves, he releases the encryption key. So she is a hostage, I said. Technically. It is not technical. Senator, it is tactical. He is using her proximity to control your behavior. That makes her a hostage. Okay, he choked out. Okay, she is a hostage. God help me. I am coming, I said. But we are going to have ground rules. Rule number 1. When I walk through those doors, I am not your daughter. I am the incident commander. You do not give me orders. You do not question my methods. You do not worry about the upholstery or the antique vases. If I say evacuate, you evacuate. If I say drop, you drop. Do you understand? Harper, be reasonable. Do you understand? I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. Because if you don't, I stay in Colorado. I drink my coffee. I watch the news. And you can explain to the FBI why your son-in-law is live streaming your tax returns. I could hear him grinding his teeth. The humiliation was palpable. He was a man who commanded boardrooms and Senate hearings, and now he was being brought to heel by the daughter he had dismissed as awkward. "I understand," he said finally. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "Rule number 2, I continued. You stay away from the press. You do not speak to them. You do not issue statements. You go into the safe room and you stay there until I clear the sector." "Fine." "Rule number 3, I said. This call is recorded. If you try to override me on sight, if you try to stop me from securing Chloe to save your reputation, I will release this recording, and the world will know you chose your career over your daughter's life." "You wouldn't," he gasped. "Try me." I hung up. My hands were steady. My pulse was 62. I felt a cold, sharp clarity. This was what I was built for. The emotional, messy parts of being a Whitmore were gone, burned away by the friction of the moment. All that was left was the mission. I grabbed my gear bag and walked out into the snow. The black SUV was already running, the remote start humming in the quiet air. I drove fast down the mountain road, drifting slightly on the ice, correcting with practiced ease. I tapped the hands-free dialer. "Sentinel Ops, this is Whitmore, ID Alpha 70. "Go ahead, Whitmore," a female voice answered. It was Sarah, one of the best intel analysts in the firm. "I need a jet," I said. "Aspen Airfield. Wheels up in 30 minutes. Destination D, C, and I need a full deep dive package on Julian Thorne. Not just financials. I need medicals. I need psychiatric history, prescription records, dark web activity. If he bought a stick of gum in 2015, I want to know what flavor." "That is a lot of red tape. Harper, we usually need a warrant or a client contract for that level of intrusion." "The client is the Whitmore family," I lied smoothly. "I have verbal authorization from the senator. He is classifying this as a national security threat due to the compromised campaign data." "Understood," Sarah said, her tone shifting. "If it is national security, we can bypass the usual channels. I will have the bird waiting." 35 minutes later, I was strapped into the leather seat of a Gulfstream G650, climbing out of the turbulence of the Rockies. The cabin was quiet, luxurious, and completely disconnected from the sordid reality waiting for me on the East Coast. I opened my laptop and connected to the plane's secure Wi-Fi. Sarah had already come through. An encrypted folder titled Thorne_J was waiting in my inbox. I started with the medicals. Julian Thorne, 31 years old, no major surgeries, but the pharmacy records were a roadmap to disaster. Adderall, Xanax, Ambien, oxycodone. He was cycling uppers to work 18-hour days, downers to sleep, and painkillers to numb the crash. It was a classic, executive cocktail, common in high-pressure tech circles, but the dosages were staggering. He wasn't just using, he was abusing. Then I saw the recent addition, testosterone cypionate, steroids. "Rage," I whispered, staring at the screen. Roid rage mixed with amphetamine psychosis. I switched to the video footage again. I watched the clip of him smashing the cello. I slowed it down, frame by frame. Look at his pupils. They were pinpricks. That was the opiates. Look at the jaw clenching. That was the stimulants. Look at the sweat, the flushing of the skin. That was the withdrawal or the overdose. He wasn't drunk. He was toxic. His brain was stewing in a chemical soup that stripped away impulse control and amplified paranoia. I looked at his body language. He wasn't swaying like a drunk. He was vibrating. His movements were jerky, explosive. He was pacing in tight circles. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a tactical nightmare. A drunk man passes out. A man on this cocktail doesn't stop until his heart explodes or someone puts him down. And then I saw something else. In the background of one of the shaky videos, just for a second, behind the screaming Julian, I saw a table. On the table were rows of white powder. "Cocaine," I said. He was speedballing. My father thought this was a scandal. He thought he could talk Julian down, sign a check, and send him to rehab in Malibu. He was wrong. You cannot reason with a chemical imbalance of this magnitude. Julian was not in the room anymore. The person holding the gun was a stranger wearing Julian's face. I closed the laptop. The gravity of the situation settled on me. I wasn't going home to negotiate a divorce. I was going home to neutralize a threat. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ms. Whitmore, we are beginning our descent into Dulles. ETA 40 minutes. We have been advised of heavy press presence at the perimeter of the destination. Do you need a back door? No, I said, looking out the window at the gray clouds gathering over the Capitol. I don't need a back door. I checked the Sig Sauer P365 in my holster. I checked the spare magazine. I checked the flashbang grenade I had swiped from the training locker non-lethal, but enough to stun a room. I am going through the front, I said to the empty cabin. Let them see the wolf come home. The tires of the black SUV crunched over the gravel of the driveway, the sound distinct and heavy against the ambient roar of the media circus waiting at the gates. I did not wait for the driver to open my door. I stepped out into the humid, gray evening of Washington, D.C., my boots hitting the pavement with a solid, grounding thud. I was not wearing the navy blue silk dress my father had initially approved for the ceremony. I was wearing a charcoal tactical jacket made of abrasion-resistant leather, dark cargo pants tailored to allow full range of motion, and heavy-duty combat boots. In my left ear, a discreet Bluetooth piece hummed with the static of the Sentinel frequency. I looked like exactly what I was, a disruption. The scene at the main gate was a study in controlled chaos. The press had smelled blood. They were pressed against the wrought iron fence, a wall of flashing cameras and shouting voices. News vans were parked on the manicured verge, their satellite dishes extended like hungry necks. Standing between the mob and the house were 4 local police cruisers, lights flashing silently. The officers looked miserable. They were standing with their arms crossed, blocking the entrance but taking no action to enter the property. I walked straight toward the police line. "Ma'am, you can't be here," a young officer said, stepping forward. He looked overwhelmed. "This is a closed perimeter." I didn't stop walking. I pulled a laminated card from my jacket pocket, a high-level security clearance ID that Sentinel Solutions issued for government contract work. It was vague enough to be impressive and official enough to be intimidating. "I am the incident commander authorized by Senator Whitmore," I said, my voice flat and projecting over the noise of the crowd. "Open the gate." The officer hesitated, glancing at the card, and then at my face. The senator gave strict orders, no one in or out. He said he is handling a private family matter. "Does it look handled to you?" I asked, gesturing to the frenzy behind me. "Open the gate, officer, or you can explain to your captain why you blocked the extraction team." He swallowed hard and keyed his radio. The heavy iron gates groaned open just wide enough for me to slip through. As I passed the threshold, a camera flash blinded me for a second. "Hey!" a reporter shouted from the crush. "Who is that?" I kept my eyes forward, but I heard the murmur ripple through the crowd. They were looking for a celebrity, a politician, or a lawyer. They were not expecting a woman dressed for urban combat. "Wait!" a voice shouted, sharp and clear. "That is the daughter. The other one. The one they never talk about." "The wolf," I thought. "They finally see the wolf." I walked up the long, winding driveway. The house loomed ahead, a Georgian revival mansion that usually projected power and stability. Tonight, it looked like a fortress under siege. The windows of the ballroom were blazing with light, but the rest of the house was dark. I reached the front steps. The massive oak doors were slightly ajar. I pushed them open and stepped into the foyer. The silence here was sudden and violent. The noise of the press was cut off, replaced by a thick, suffocating atmosphere of dread. The air smelled of expensive lilies, stale champagne, and something metallic fear. I moved silently across the marble floor. To my left, the gift table had been overturned. Silver-wrapped boxes lay scattered like debris from a crash. A portrait of my father and stepmother that usually hung in the hallway was crooked. The glass shattered. I approached the double doors of the ballroom. They were wide open. I stopped in the frame, assessing the battlefield. It was a ruin. The meticulously planned reception, which had cost $300,000, had been reduced to garbage. The 10-tier wedding cake, a masterpiece of fondant and sugarwork, was destroyed. It looked like someone had taken a baseball bat to the bottom layers, causing the entire structure to collapse into a heap of white rubble on the floor. Broken glass glittered everywhere under the chandeliers. Wine stains soaked into the white carpet like blood splatter. The guests, those who hadn't fled, were huddled in the far corners of the room. Behind the overturned round tables, they were holding their phones, some recording, some texting, all terrified. And there, in the center of it all, was the performance. Julian was sitting on the edge of the stage where the orchestra had been playing. He looked worse than he had in the video on the plane. His tuxedo jacket was gone. His white dress shirt was torn at the shoulder, soaked through with sweat. In his left hand, he held his phone, the camera facing him. In his right hand, he held the neck of a broken champagne bottle, the jagged edges catching the light. The silver pistol I had seen in the intel report was tucked into the back of his waistband, visible every time he leaned forward. "You think you can silence me?" Julian was shouting at the phone screen, his voice raspy. "I am the only one telling the truth. The numbers don't lie. I cooked the books for you, didn't I? Senator, I hid the losses so you could get your re-election funding." He laughed. A wet, hacking sound. My parents were standing near the cake debris, about 20 feet away from him. They looked small. My father, the man who could command a room with a raised eyebrow, was slumped. His face was gray, his eyes wide and vacant. My stepmother was weeping silently, her hand covering her mouth, her makeup streaked down her face. They were paralyzed. They were watching a monster they had invited in, and they had no idea how to make him leave. I took a breath. I adjusted the cuffs of my jacket. I checked the position of the flashbang in my pocket. Then I stepped into the room. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I walked down the center aisle, my boots crunching on the broken glass. The sound was distinct, rhythmic, and intentional. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Heads turned. The guests in the corner looked up. My stepmother gasped. My father turned his head, and for a second, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Not relief, but shock. He hadn't actually believed I would come. He hadn't believed the tool he discarded would return to the shelf on its own accord. I ignored him. I ignored my stepmother. I did not look at the guests. My eyes were locked on Julian. I stopped 10 feet away from the stage. I stood with my feet shoulder-width apart, my hands hanging loose and empty at my sides. A non-threatening posture that allowed for a draw speed of under 1 second. Julian stopped talking. He lowered the phone slowly, squinting through the glare of the lights. The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning and the ragged breathing of the man on the stage. He peered at me, his eyes dilated and wild. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand, smearing blood from a small cut on his knuckle across his cheek. "Well, well," Julian said. His voice was a sneer, dripping with toxic charisma. "Look who decided to crash the party." He stood up, swaying slightly. He held the broken bottle out toward me like a conductor's baton. "The black sheep returns," he announced to the room and to the thousands of people watching his live stream. "Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to Harper, the disgrace, the invisible daughter, the one they hid in the attic." He laughed again, stepping to the edge of the stage, towering over me. "What are you doing here, Harper?" he asked, his voice dropping to a mock whisper. "Did you come to clean up the trash for your daddy? Did he pay you, or did you just come to beg for scraps like you always do?" I did not flinch. I did not blink. I looked at the broken bottle. I looked at the gun in his waistband. I looked at the frantic pulse beating in his jugular vein. "I am not here for him," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and loud enough to be heard in the back of the room without shouting. "And I am not here for the trash." I took one step closer. I am here to turn off the camera. Julian. You are here to turn off the camera. Julian repeated my words, his voice booming with theatrical incredulity. He stepped back, dragging his feet through the shards of glass, and grabbed Chloe by the upper arm. He yanked her violently from where she had been standing paralyzed near the ruins of the cake. She stumbled, gasping, her white dress snagging on a piece of debris. "Look at this!" Julian shouted to the phone he was still holding, angling the screen so his millions of viewers could see my sister's terrified face. "The cavalry has arrived. The reject sister thinks she can give orders." He tightened his grip on Chloe's bicep. I saw her wince. I saw the blood drain from her face. "Julian," I said. My voice was low, pitched to cut through the adrenaline flooding his system. "I am not giving orders. I am asking a question." "You don't get to ask questions," he screamed, swinging the jagged neck of the champagne bottle dangerously close to Chloe's cheek. "You are nobody. You are the family secret your father told me about you. He told me you were broken. He told me you were cold." "He said I was cold," I repeated. I was using a technique called mirroring. It is the most basic tool in a negotiator's kit. You repeat the last few words the subject says. It forces their brain to process the repetition, creating a microscopic pause in their aggression loop. It makes them feel heard without you actually agreeing to anything. "Yes." "Cold." Julian spat. "He said you scare people. That is why he didn't want you here. He is ashamed of you." "He is ashamed of me," I said. Taking a half step forward, I kept my hands open, palms visible. "And he is ashamed of you right now, isn't he?" Julian froze. The bait was in the water. "He is not ashamed of me," Julian snarled, though his eyes darted nervously toward my father, who was still cowering by the wall. "He is afraid of me. There is a difference." "You are right," I said softly. "There is a difference. He used you, Julian, just like he used me." I saw the shift. It was subtle, a slight relaxing of the shoulder muscles, a flicker of confusion in the eyes. Narcissists operate on a binary system. You are either with them or against them. By validating his grievance, by placing myself in the victim category alongside him, I was confusing his targeting system. "He promised me everything," Julian muttered, the manic energy dipping into self-pity. "He said if I bailed out the campaign, he would get me the zoning permits for the waterfront. He said it was a done deal." "And he lied," I said. "He always lies when he needs money." Behind Julian, I made eye contact with my mother, my stepmother. Eleanor. She was trembling, clutching a napkin to her mouth. I moved my right hand slightly, a small, sweeping gesture toward the side exit. "Go." Eleanor blinked. She looked at my father. I hardened my gaze. "Move, now." My father seemed to understand. He grabbed Eleanor's elbow. They began to shuffle backward, inch by inch, moving out of the frame of Julian's livestream. The few remaining guests followed suit, sensing the shift in the room's gravity. "Where are they going?" Julian snapped, his head whipping around. "Let them go," I said quickly, drawing his attention back to me. "They don't matter. They are the audience. Julian, you don't need the audience anymore. You have the world watching." I nodded at the phone in his hand. "You have the truth." "The truth," he echoed. He looked at the phone screen, mesmerized by his own reflection and the stream of hearts and shocked emojis flying up the side. "They treat people like us like assets," I continued, my voice taking on a bitter edge that wasn't entirely feigned. "They dress us up. They put us in the right schools. They take the photos. But the moment we are inconvenient, the moment we have a problem, they lock the door." Julian nodded, the jagged bottle lowered an inch. "I worked 18 hours a day," he said, his voice cracking. "I built Thorn Dynamics from nothing, and he looks at me like I am a checkbook. He doesn't respect me. He thinks he is better than me because his money is old and mine is new." "I know," I said. "He thinks he is better than everyone. He told me I wasn't good enough to be in the photos today. He banned me. Julian, he kicked me out. He did, Julian said, a twisted smile appearing. He told me he handled you. He tried to handle both of us, I said. We are the same. You and I, we are the ones who do the heavy lifting while he drinks the champagne. I took another step. I was now 8 feet away. This was the danger zone. Inside 21 feet, a man with a knife or a bottle can close the distance faster than you can draw a weapon. But I didn't need to draw. I needed to get close enough to touch. I am drowning. Harper, Julian whispered. The rage was evaporating, leaving behind the terrified, chemical-soaked child underneath. The margin calls. The SEC investigation. I thought if I married Chloe, the connections would save me. I thought the Whitmore name was a shield. It is not a shield, I said gently. It is an anchor. It drags you down. He looked at me, his eyes wet with tears. For a second, he looked human. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I just wanted them to listen. While he was looking at me, I shifted my gaze to Chloe. She was still gripped in his left hand, but his hold had loosened as he got lost in his own narrative. I locked eyes with her. I gave a microscopic nod. Then I flicked my eyes to the left. Pull away. Now, Chloe, to her credit, did not hesitate. The fear had paralyzed her, but my presence had given her something to focus on. She jerked her arm back. It wasn't a violent motion, but it was enough. Julian's grip, slippery with sweat, failed. Chloe stumbled back, putting 3 feet of space between them. The spell broke. Julian blinked. He looked at his empty hand. He looked at Chloe retreating. The validation I had built, the empathy I had constructed, shattered instantly. The narcissist realized he was losing control of his prop. "No!" he roared. The rage returned, faster and hotter than before. He didn't look at me. He looked at Chloe. He raised the broken bottle, intending to lunge after her, to punish the object that dared to leave his orbit. "You don't walk away from me!" he screamed. He took a step toward her. I moved. I did not run. I exploded from my stance. I closed the 8-foot gap in less than 1 second. Julian saw the movement in his peripheral vision. He spun toward me, swinging the bottle in a wide, clumsy arc aimed at my face. It was slow. To a civilian, it would have been terrifying. To me, it was telegraphing a headline. I ducked under the swing, feeling the wind of the glass pass over my hair. I stepped inside his guard, invading his personal space so close I could smell the sour reek of adrenaline and expensive cologne. I didn't punch him. Punching breaks your hand and leaves bruises that look bad in court. I used Krav Maga. Efficient, ugly, final. My left hand shot up and clamped onto his wrist, the one holding the bottle. I didn't just grab it. I drove my thumb into the pressure point on the inside of his forearm. He shrieked. The nerve pain forced his fingers to spasm open. The bottle fell, shattering on the floor. Simultaneously, I drove my right shoulder into his solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him, while my right leg swept behind his knee. It is simple physics. Take away the balance, apply leverage to a joint, and gravity does the rest. I rotated his arm behind his back, forcing his shoulder joint to the limit of its range of motion. He crumpled. He didn't have a choice. His body followed the pain to the ground. He hit the carpet face down with a heavy thud. "Stay down," I hissed into his ear. He tried to buck, to fight back. He was strong, fueled by the drugs, but I had position. I pressed my knee into the back of his tricep, pinning him to the floor. "Let go of me," he screamed, his face pressed into the wine-stained carpet. "I will sue you, I will kill you." "You are done talking," I said. I looked up. The room was silent again. Chloe was standing 10 feet away, her hands covering her mouth, staring at me. Then the side doors burst open. 3 men in dark suits entered. They didn't look like police. They didn't yell, "Freeze." They moved with the quiet, fluid precision of professionals. Reynolds had come through. This was my team from Sentinel. "Secure him," I said, standing up and stepping back. 2 of the men moved in immediately. They didn't use standard police handcuffs. They used zip ties, securing Julian's wrists and ankles with practiced speed. One of them knelt by his head, speaking quietly but firmly, placing a hand on his shoulder to keep him grounded. "Mr. Thorne, you are having a medical episode," the agent said. "We are here to help you." It was brilliant. It was the soft takedown. To the camera, which was still streaming face up on the floor a few feet away, it looked like paramedics restraining a sick man. Not a security team taking down a hostile. Julian was still screaming obscenities, but the third agent simply picked up the phone from the floor. He didn't smash it. He simply ended the stream and slipped it into a Faraday bag, a pouch designed to block all signals. The room went dark as the agent killed the connection. I walked over to Chloe. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. She looked at Julian, trussed up on the floor like a Thanksgiving turkey, and then she looked at me. "Is it over?" she whispered. I reached out and brushed a piece of confetti from her shoulder. "The show is over. Chloe." "He had a gun," she said, her voice trembling. He said he would use it." "I know," I said. I reached around to the back of Julian's waistband, where the agents had already lifted his shirt. The silver pistol was there. I pulled it out, cleared the chamber a hollow-point bullet spun out onto the carpet, and dropped the magazine. I handed the empty weapon to the lead agent. "Clear," I said. I turned back to my sister. I didn't hug her. I wasn't the hugging kind, but I stood between her and the man on the floor, blocking her view of him completely. "You are safe," I said. "He can't touch you. He can't speak to you. He is a ghost." My father and stepmother emerged from the shadows of the hallway. My father looked at the scene, the agents, the bound groom, the shattered reception. He looked at me. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to ask about the press or the phone or the servers. "Don't," I said, cutting him off before he could start. "Check on your daughter, Senator. That is your only job right now." He flinched, then nodded. He walked past me and put his arms around Chloe. For the first time all day, he didn't look like a politician. He looked like a father who had almost lost something he forgot to value. I stepped back, fading toward the edge of the room. The adrenaline was starting to recede, leaving behind a cold, sharp fatigue. I watched the Sentinel team lift Julian onto a stretcher they had brought in from the service entrance. They covered him with a sheet, not over his head, but up to his neck, further selling the medical emergency narrative as they wheeled him out. Julian turned his head. His eyes found mine. The rage was gone, replaced by a terrified realization of what he had done. "Harper," he croaked. "Help me." I looked at him. I felt nothing. No pity, no anger, just the professional satisfaction of a problem solved. "I did help you, Julian," I said quietly. "I stopped you from turning a meltdown into a murder." They wheeled him out. The door swung shut. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Chloe sobbing into my father's shoulder. I checked my watch. The entire engagement, from the moment I entered the room to the moment Julian was secured, had taken less than 4 minutes. 4 minutes to dismantle a threat. 4 minutes to end a marriage. 4 minutes to rewrite the history of the Whitmore family. I walked over to the table where the wedding cake lay in ruins. I picked up a piece of sugar flour, a white orchid, perfectly crafted, now crushed. I crushed it further between my fingers until it was just dust. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed Reynolds. "Package secured," I said. "Now we handle the fallout." The heavy oak doors of the library clicked shut, sealing us inside with the smell of old leather and the lingering scent of my father's expensive cigars. Outside in the hallway, 2 of my Sentinel agents stood guard, their presence a silent reminder that this house was no longer a home, but a secure command post. My father walked straight to the crystal decanter on the sideboard. His hands were shaking so badly that the glass clinked rhythmically against the bottleneck as he poured. He downed the amber liquid in one swallow, then poured another. He did not offer one to me. He did not offer one to his wife, Eleanor, who was sitting on the velvet sofa, staring blankly at a spot on the rug. Chloe was curled up in the wingback chair by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket I had pulled from the linen closet. She looked like a ghost. Her face scrubbed clean of makeup, but still swollen from crying. I stood by the desk, my hand resting on a thick manila folder that Reynolds had couriered over from the D.C. field office 20 minutes ago. It was heavy. It felt like a brick, and in a way, it was the brick I was about to use to smash the last of my father's illusions. "We can contain this," my father said, turning to face us. The alcohol had brought a flush of color back to his cheeks, and with it, a dangerous return of his confidence. "I have been thinking. We don't hand him over to the police yet. That creates a mugshot. That creates an arrest record. Once that is in the system, we lose control of the narrative." He began to pace, his shoes clicking on the hardwood floor. He was back in campaign mode, spinning a disaster into a policy statement. "We keep him at the private clinic in Maryland," he continued, gesturing with his glass. "We release a statement saying Julian suffered a severe adverse reaction to a combination of prescribed medication and exhaustion. A psychotic break induced by stress. The public is sympathetic to mental health issues these days. It plays well. We paint him as a victim of his own ambition. We announce an amicable annulment based on medical grounds. We pay him a settlement to sign a non-disclosure agreement. $5 million should do it. Maybe 10. He goes away. He stays quiet. We rebuild." He stopped and looked at me, expecting validation. Expecting the daughter who used to crave his approval to nod and say, "Yes, Senator, that is brilliant." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had shaped my life by excluding me from it, and I felt a profound, cold pity. "You want to pay him," I said flatly. "It is the cost of doing business." "Harper," he said, dismissing my tone. "Julian is volatile, but he is also a businessman. He understands leverage. Right now, he has none. If we offer him a golden parachute, he will take it. He needs the money." "He certainly does," I said. "But $10 million will not be enough." "Then we give him 15, my father snapped. "Whatever it takes to buy his silence." "You cannot buy silence from a man who is already screaming in a burning building," I said. I picked up the folder. I didn't hand it to him. I tossed it onto the center of the desk. It landed with a heavy, authoritative thud that made Eleanor jump. "What is this?" my father asked, eyeing the file like it was a bomb. "That," I said, "is the reason why your strategy will send you to federal prison." My father frowned. "Do not be dramatic. Harper, I am talking about a civil settlement." "Read it," I said. He hesitated, then put down his drink and opened the folder. I watched his eyes scan the first page. I watched the confusion turn to shock, and the shock turn to horror. I watched his knees weaken until he had to lean against the desk for support. This cannot be right," he whispered. "It is verified," I said, my voice clinical. "Sentinel's forensic accountants pulled the raw data from the Cayman servers an hour ago. Julian's company, Thorn Dynamics, it does not exist. Not really. It is a shell company. A ghost." I walked over to the desk and tapped the page he was reading. "Julian has been running a Ponzi scheme for 4 years, I explained, addressing the room but keeping my eyes on my father. "He took money from investors' venture capital, angel funds, even the pension fund from the teachers' union in Ohio, and he used it to pay off previous investors to keep the illusion of profit alive. He burned through $200 million in capital." $200 million, Eleanor breathed, her hand flying to her throat. "Where did it go?" my father asked, his voice hollow. "Lifestyle," I said. "Private jets, the villas in Tuscany, the cars, and the bribes. He has been bribing auditors to cook the books since 2022. But the money ran out 3 months ago. The walls were closing in. The Securities and Exchange Commission issued a subpoena last week. He didn't tell you that, did he?" My father shook his head slowly. "No, he said it was a standard audit." "It was a target letter," I corrected. "He is facing charges for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. He is looking at 20 to 30 years in federal prison." I turned to Chloe. She was staring at me, her eyes wide and dark. This was the part that was going to hurt, but a clean cut is better than a jagged tear. "Chloe," I said softly, "Julian did not propose to you because he fell in love with your laugh. He did not rush the wedding date because he couldn't wait to start a life with you." "Why?" she whispered. "Because the subpoena was coming." I said, "He needed a shield. He needed to marry into a family with enough political weight to stall the investigation. He thought if he was the son-in-law of Senator Whitmore, the Department of Justice would hesitate. He thought he could use Dad's connections to get a government bailout for his company, classify it as too big to fail defense technology, and plug the hole in his finances before anyone noticed." Chloe made a small, wounded sound. "He used me. He used all of us," I said. "But there is more." I turned back to the folder and flipped to the back page. A photograph was clipped to a document. It showed Julian meeting with a man in a suit at a cafe in Zurich. "This was taken 4 days ago," I said. "The man he is meeting is a facilitator for non-extradition relocation. Julian wasn't planning to stay married to you, Chloe. He was planning to take the dowry money, the $5 million Dad transferred to the joint account last week, as a wedding gift and disappear during the honeymoon." "Disappear," my father echoed. "He was going to run," I said. "He was going to leave Chloe in a hotel room in Paris or Rome, drain the accounts, and fly to a country that does not have an extradition treaty with the United States. He was looking at properties in northern Cyprus." The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a world ending. Chloe put her head down on her knees and began to sob. It wasn't the hysterical crying of before. It was the deep, grieving sorrow of humiliation. My father stared at the document. His hand was trembling again. He played me," my father whispered. "He sat at my table. He drank my wine. And he was planning to rob me and abandon my daughter." "Yes," I said. "And now, let's talk about your plan to pay him off." I leaned in close, invading my father's personal space. "If you give him money now," I said, my voice low and hard, "you are not paying a settlement. You are funding the escape of a fugitive. You are financing a federal crime. That is called aiding and abetting. It is called harboring a criminal, and when not if, but when the FBI catches him and they trace that money back to you, you won't just lose the election, you will go to prison." My father recoiled as if I had slapped him. He looked at the folder, then at me. For the first time, the arrogance was gone. The mask of the statesman had dissolved, leaving behind a frightened old man who realized he had walked into a trap he couldn't talk his way out of. "I didn't know," he stammered. "Harper, I swear, I didn't know." "Ignorance is not a defense when you are a United States Senator," I said. "The press will say you were in on it. They will say the marriage was a merger of criminal interests. They will say you sold your daughter to cover up a fraud." "Oh my God," Eleanor moaned. "We are ruined. You are ruined if you hide," I said. "You are ruined if you try to be clever. You are ruined if you try to spin this." My father looked at me. His eyes were desperate. He was searching for a lifeline, and he finally realized that the only person holding a rope was the daughter he had tried to cut loose. "What do I do?" he asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with surrender. "You stop being a politician," I said, "and you start being a victim." "A victim." "Yes, you were defrauded. Your daughter was emotionally manipulated. You are shocked. You are appalled. You are the one who called the authorities." "But the video," he argued weakly. "He said I made a deal for the zoning permits." "The rantings of a desperate criminal," I countered immediately. "He was lying about his finances. Why wouldn't he lie about you? We destroy his credibility. We show the world the Ponzi scheme. We show them the fake accounts. By the time we are done, no one will believe a word Julian says. He becomes a pathological liar who tried to smear a senator to save his own skin." I pointed to the phone on the desk. "You are going to pick up that phone," I said. "You are going to call the director of the FBI. You know him personally. Don't you?" My father nodded dumbly. "Yes, Robert." You call Robert, I instructed. You tell him you have just discovered evidence of massive financial fraud committed by your son-in-law. You tell him that Julian is currently detained by private security at your residence because he became violent. You tell him you want federal agents here immediately to take custody. And then we hold a press conference, I said. Not tonight. Tomorrow morning, we stand on the front steps, you, Eleanor, and me. We tell the truth, or at least, the version of the truth that saves this family. We say we were targeted by a con artist. We say we are cooperating fully with the investigation. We pivot from scandal to justice. My father looked at the phone. He looked at the dossier. He looked at Chloe, weeping in the chair. He took a deep breath. He straightened his spine. It was a reflex, a muscle memory of authority returning. But this time, it was braced by something real. You are right, he said. His voice was quiet, but steady. He looked at me with a strange expression. It wasn't love. It wasn't warmth. It was respect. Cold, hard, professional respect. I thought you were the liability, he said. I thought you were too rough, too blunt. I thought you didn't understand how the world works. I know exactly how the world works. Dad, I said, it works on leverage, and right now, we have it all. He nodded. He reached for the phone. Harper, he said before he dialed. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said, walking toward the door. Thank me when the handcuffs are on him and not on you. I opened the library door and signaled to Reynolds, who was waiting in the corridor. Get the car ready, I said. The FBI is coming to pick up the trash. I walked over to Chloe. I crouched down beside her chair and placed a hand on her knee. She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. He is going to prison, Chloe, I said. For a long time, he can never hurt you again. She sniffed, wiping her nose with the blanket. I feel so stupid. Harper, I thought he was my Prince Charming. Princes are for fairy tales, I said, standing up and smoothing my jacket. And fairy tales aren't real, but survival is real, and you survived. I walked out of the library, leaving them to make the call. I needed fresh air. I needed to wash the scent of desperation off my skin. As I stepped onto the terrace, the cool night air hit my face. The rain had started to fall, washing away the blood and the wine on the patio. I took a deep breath. The truth was out. The secret was weaponized. The wolf had not only entered the house, she had taken command of the pack, and the night was far from over. The dining room had been transformed into a war room. The mahogany table, usually reserved for Thanksgiving dinners and political fundraisers, was now covered in laptops, tablets, and tangled charging cables. My father's communication director, a man named Gerald, who had been managing campaigns since the 90s, was pacing back and forth. He was sweating through his suit. We go with no comment, Gerald stammered, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. We say it is a private family matter. We ask for privacy. We lock down the social media accounts. I was sitting at the head of the table. I didn't look up from my laptop. That is a 1990s strategy for a 2026 problem. Gerald, I said, if you say no comment today, the internet hears we are guilty. If you ask for privacy, they will fly drones over the backyard. We are not locking down. We are opening fire. Opening fire. Gerald looked at my father. Senator, your daughter is talking about engaging with the mob. We should be de-escalating. My father was sitting to my right. He looked exhausted. Holding a cup of lukewarm tea, he looked at Gerald. Then he looked at me. The hierarchy had shifted permanently. Listen to her, Gerald, my father said quietly. But Senator, I said listen to her, my father snapped, slamming his cup down. You didn't see the truck coming. She did. I turned my laptop around so they could see the screen. Here is the new narrative, I said. We do not apologize. We do not hide. We pivot. The headline is not Senator's daughter marries fraudster. The headline is Senator Whitmore exposes financial predator to protect family. Gerald blinked. But Julian exposed himself. The public saw a video, I corrected. They don't know the context. We provide the context. We say the senator had been suspicious for weeks. We say we hired private investigators. We say the confrontation at the wedding happened because we were about to hand him over to the authorities, and he panicked. You want to lie? Gerald asked. I want to curate the truth, I said. Julian is a criminal. That is a fact. We are the victims. That is a fact. The timeline. The timeline is flexible. I hit the enter key. I have already drafted the press release, I said. It goes out in 5 minutes, simultaneously. I am leaking the forensic accounting report redacted to protect our bank details to Elena Russo at the Washington Post. Russo, my father sat up straighter. She hates me. She wrote that hit piece on my environmental voting record last year. Exactly, I said. If you leak it to a friend, it looks like propaganda. If you leak it to an enemy, it looks like a scoop. Russo will be so excited to have the exclusive on the Ponzi scheme that she won't question why we gave it to her. She will validate our story because she wants the Pulitzer. I looked at Gerald. You are relieved of duty for the night. Gerald, go home, watch the news, learn something. Gerald left, looking like a man who had just escaped a firing squad. I turned back to my screen. The real battle wasn't the press release. It was the digital skirmish happening in the servants' quarters, where we were holding Julian until the FBI arrived. One of my Sentinel agents, a tech specialist named Miller, looked up from his monitor. He has a secondary device, Miller said. Scanner just picked up a signal spike in the holding room. He must have had a smartwatch or a burner phone taped to his ankle. I pulled up the feed from the security camera in the holding room. Julian was sitting on a folding chair, his hands zip-tied in front of him. He was fumbling with something small and black, tapping furiously with his thumbs. He was trying to go live again. He wanted to get his version out. He wanted to tell the world that the senator was corrupt, that he was the victim, that we were holding him hostage. Do not enter the room, I ordered Miller. If you go in, it creates a scene. He will scream he is being beaten. We fight this in the air. Jamming protocol? Miller asked. Blackout, I said. Kill the cellular spectrum in that room. Wi-Fi, 5G, LTE. I want that phone to be a paperweight. Miller typed a command. On the screen, I watched Julian. He held the phone up, preparing to speak. His mouth opened. Then he paused. He tapped the screen. He shook the phone. He tapped it again. The signal bars had gone to 0. I watched the frustration build on his face. He stood up and moved to the window. Still nothing. He moved to the door. Nothing. He was screaming silently at the plastic device. A narcissist cut off from his reflection. Target is neutralized, Miller said. He is shouting at the wall. Let him shout, I said. No one can hear him. I turned back to the PR campaign. I opened the secure channel to Elena Russo. I attached the file. Thorn _financial fraud evidence final.pdf. I typed a simple message. You want the truth about the wedding video? Here are the receipts. He stole $200 million. The senator found out. The groom snapped. Exclusive is yours if you run it within the hour. I hit send. Then I opened X, the platform formerly known as Twitter. The hashtag #WeddingWarzone was still trending #1 worldwide, but the tone was chaotic. People were mocking the cake, mocking Chloe's dress, mocking my father's terrified face. Wait for it, I whispered. 40 minutes later, the Washington Post broke the story. Breaking wedding meltdown. Triggered by multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme discovery. Groom Julian Thorne, accused of defrauding investors. The article was brutal. It laid out the fake companies, the offshore accounts, the desperate loans. It painted Julian not as a scorned lover, but as a cornered rat, and crucially, it positioned the Whitmore family as the primary victims of a sociopath. I refreshed the social media feed. The tide began to turn. It started slow. Then it became a wave. User 1. Wait. He stole 200 million. No wonder the dad looked sick. He wasn't scared. He was horrified. User 2. That poor bride. Imagine finding out your husband is a felon at the altar. Justice for Chloe. User 3. Who was the woman in the black jacket? Did you see her take him down? She moved like John Wick. User 4. The sister. The one they hide. She just saved the whole family. The wolf sister. I allowed myself a grim smile. The wolf sister. I could work with that. The door to the dining room opened. It was Eleanor. She had changed out of her ruined mother-of-the-bride dress into a simple gray sweater and slacks. She looked older without the jewelry and the forced smile. She was holding a tray with 2 cups of coffee. She walked over to the table and set a cup down next to me. Black, no sugar, just the way I took it. She remembered, or maybe she had just asked someone. The FBI is at the gate, she said softly. They are coming up the drive. Good, I said, typing a final instruction to the bot farm I had hired to amplify the Post article. We are ready for them. Eleanor didn't leave. She stood there, her hands clasping the empty tray against her chest like a shield. Harper, she said. I stopped typing but didn't look up. We are busy. Eleanor, if you need to cry, please do it in the living room. I don't need to cry, she said. Her voice was steady, surprising me. I need to say something. I finally turned my swivel chair to face her. Make it fast. She looked at me. Really looked at me. For 20 years. This woman had looked through me. She had treated me like a stain on the carpet, something to be scrubbed away or covered up. Now, she was looking at me like I was the only solid thing in a dissolving world. I was wrong, she said. We have established that, I replied. You chose a grifter over your stepdaughter because he wore a better suit. No, she said. I mean, I was wrong about you. I told your father you were dangerous. I told him you were too hard, that you didn't fit in. I encouraged him to keep you away. I know, I said. I heard you say it on Christmas Eve in 2015. You thought I was asleep on the sofa. She flinched. I am sorry. I was scared of you because I didn't understand you. I thought your hardness was a defect. Tonight, I realized it is armor, and it is the only reason Chloe is safe. Is that all? I asked. Thank you, she said. For coming back? You didn't have to. I didn't come back for you, I said coldly. I came back because Chloe is blood, and because I don't like losing. She nodded, accepting the rejection. She knew she hadn't earned warmth. She had only earned safety. The agents are in the foyer, she said. They want to speak to the incident commander. That is me, I said. Standing up, I walked past her. I didn't offer forgiveness. Forgiveness is a luxury for people who can afford to forget. I couldn't afford that. I needed to remember exactly who these people were, even while I saved them. In the foyer, 4 FBI agents were waiting. They were wearing windbreakers with the yellow letters on the back. The lead agent was a man I recognized, Special Agent Miller. Not my Miller. The Bureau's Miller. A by-the-book guy I had run into during a joint task force operation in Chicago. Whitmore, he said, looking surprised. I didn't know you were private sector now. Consulting, I said. The suspect is in the West Wing service quarters, restrained. He has been read his rights by my team, but you should do it again for the record. We will, Miller said. We have the warrant, wire fraud, money laundering, flight risk. He is all yours, I said. Watch his hands. He is scratchy. I led them to the holding room. My Sentinel agents stepped back as the FBI moved in. They hauled Julian to his feet. He looked terrible. The drugs were wearing off, replaced by the crushing reality of federal custody. His eyes were sunken, his skin gray. But when he saw the FBI jackets, a new kind of desperation lit up his face. Wait, Julian shouted as they dragged him toward the door. I want to make a deal. I have information. You can talk to your lawyer, Agent Miller said, pushing him forward. No, I want to talk now, Julian screamed, twisting his head to look at my father, who had emerged from the dining room to watch the arrest. He knew. The senator knew. My father went pale. He didn't know about the fraud, Julian yelled, spit flying from his lips. But he knew about the zoning permits. He traded the Arlington wetlands for campaign donations. I have the emails. I have the recordings. I stepped forward, blocking his view of my father. You are hallucinating, Julian, I said calmly. Get him out of here. I am not hallucinating, Julian shrieked as they forced him through the front door. Check the server. The drive labeled Omega. It is all there. The bribes. The cover-ups. He is dirty. They are all dirty. His voice faded as they shoved him into the back of the SUV. The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off his accusations. But the silence that followed was not peaceful. Agent Miller turned back to me. He didn't look like a friend anymore. He looked like a Fed. Whitmore, Miller said, his voice low. Did he say Omega? I kept my face perfectly still. He is a desperate man throwing spaghetti at the wall. Miller, he is trying to create leverage where there is none. Maybe, Miller said. He looked at my father, who was leaning against the doorframe, looking like he might vomit. But if he gives us probable cause, we have to look at those servers. You know the drill. I know the drill, I said. Do your job. We have nothing to hide. Miller stared at me for a long moment. I hope not. Harper, for your sake. You did a good job tonight. Don't ruin it by being an accessory. He turned and walked out into the rain. I closed the front door and locked it. I turned to my father. He was shaking. Dad, I said, what is the Omega Drive? He looked at me, terror in his eyes. It was supposed to be deleted, he whispered. Julian said he deleted it. Julian never deletes anything, I said. He hoards leverage. It is just conversations, my father stammered. About the zoning board. I might have promised expedited processing for certain donors. Quid pro quo, I said. Corruption. It is how Washington works, he pleaded. It is how people go to jail, I said. I looked at the library door. The servers were still in there. The FBI had Julian, but they didn't have the physical drives yet. They would be back with a search warrant by morning. Julian would sing like a canary to reduce his sentence. He would trade the senator for 5 years off his time. My father grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, desperate. Harper, you have to fix this, he begged. You controlled the narrative. You controlled the crowd. Please, control this. I looked at his hand on my arm, the same hand that had signed the checks to send me away to boarding school, the same hand that had waved me out of his office 3 days ago. I pulled my arm away. I saved your reputation from a sociopath, I said, but I am not going to destroy evidence for you. Harper, I am not going to be your accomplice, I said, but I paused. I looked at the grandfather clock in the hallway. It was 2 a.m. But what? He asked, hope flaring in his eyes. But the FBI doesn't have the warrant yet, I said, and until they do, those servers are private property. And if a clumsily placed magnet were to corrupt the data, or if a power surge were to fry the hard drives, that would be a terrible accident. My father stared at me. You would do that? I wouldn't do anything, I said carefully. I am going to make a sandwich. I will be in the kitchen for 20 minutes. What happens in the library during that time is none of my business. I turned and walked toward the kitchen. Harper, he called out. I stopped. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me, I said without looking back. Just make sure you don't miss any files, because if you do, I won't be the one coming to visit you in federal prison. I pushed open the kitchen door. I needed that sandwich, and I needed to think, because Julian wasn't done. He had fired the first shot of the war, and even from inside a cell, he could still burn this house down. I had won the battle of the wedding. Now I had to win the war of the indictment. The image of Julian Thorne being led out of the heavy oak front doors of our family estate in handcuffs became the defining photograph of the year before the sun even came up. It was framed perfectly. The rain was slicking his hair down his forehead. His tuxedo shirt was torn at the collar, and his face was twisted in a rictus of defeated rage. The FBI windbreakers surrounding him provided a stark, yellow-lettered contrast to the elegance of the Georgian architecture. It was the visual definition of a fall from grace. I stood in the kitchen, watching the image cycle on the small television mounted under the cabinets. The news chyron read, "Groom arrested at senator's wedding. Massive fraud alleged." It was 6 a.m. The house was quiet, in the way a battlefield is quiet after the artillery stops. The smell of ozone and wet grass drifted in through the cracked window. My father walked in. He looked 10 years older than he had yesterday. His eyes were rimmed with red, and his hands, usually so steady when shaking hands with donors, were trembling slightly as he reached for the coffee pot. He had done what I suggested in the library. I knew he had. I could smell the faint, acrid scent of burnt plastic clinging to his clothes, the smell of a hard drive meeting a microwave or a fireplace. The evidence of the direct bribes was gone, but the fear was not. "They are going to indict me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of doom. I turned from the television. "They indicted Julian. You are just a witness." "For now," he said, leaning against the counter. "But Julian is going to talk. He is going to tell them about the introductions I made to the zoning board. He will tell them I vouched for his liquidity when I knew he was leveraging debt. He will paint me as a partner. Harper, not a victim." "He can say whatever he wants," I said, taking a sip of my black coffee. "Without the Omega Drive. It is his word against the word of a sitting United States Senator, and his word is currently worth nothing because we just proved he is a pathological liar who ran a Ponzi scheme." "It is not enough," my father insisted. He began to pace the small kitchen, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum. "The FBI isn't stupid. Miller looked at me last night. He knows. If they dig into the zoning board approvals, they will find irregularities. They will find that I expedited the permits. It is technical corruption. Harper, it is influence peddling. If that comes out, I lose the committee seat. I lose the re-election. I lose everything." He stopped and looked at me, his eyes wide and desperate. "You have to help me. You fix the wedding. Fix this." I set my mug down on the counter with a deliberate click. "I cannot fix the past, Dad," I said. "You broke the law. You traded influence for campaign cash. That happened. I can't untie that knot." "Then what do I do?" he pleaded. "Do I deny it? Do I attack the investigation?" "No," I said sharply. "If you deny it, you trigger a cover-up investigation. That is what gets you impeached. You don't hide. You get ahead of it." "How?" "You confess," I said. He recoiled, as if I had thrown scalding water on him. "Confess. Are you insane? You want me to admit to a felony?" "I want you to admit to a flaw," I corrected. "We call it a modified limited hangout. You call a press conference today. You stand on the steps. You look devastated. And you admit that you pushed the zoning permits through. That is suicide." "No, it is survival," I said, stepping into his space. "You don't say you did it for money. You say you did it because you trusted Julian. You say you were so blinded by your desire to help your son-in-law's visionary project that you cut corners on the bureaucracy. You frame it as a lapse in judgment caused by family loyalty. You frame it as a father trying to help his daughter's fiancé succeed." I watched him process this. I could see the gears turning, calculating the political math. "You admit to negligence," I continued. "You admit to being duped. You say, 'I wanted to believe in him so much that I didn't do my due diligence.' You apologize to the public for letting a predator exploit your office. You ask for forgiveness for being a foolish father, not a corrupt politician." "A foolish father," he repeated, tasting the words. "It makes me look weak. It makes you look human," I countered. "And right now, human is the only thing that saves you from prison. If you try to look strong, they will tear you apart. If you look like a victim who made a mistake out of love, the public will pity you. And the Justice Department rarely indicts a pity case if there is no hard evidence of a quid pro quo. He shook his head, his pride flaring up one last time. I can't do it. I can't stand there and tell the world I was incompetent. I am a leader. Harper, I am a statesman. This strategy, it is humiliating. It is necessary, I said. No, he said, straightening his spine. I will deny it. I will say Julian is lying about the permits. I will say I had nothing to do with it. My record speaks for itself. I looked at him. I saw the arrogance that had defined my childhood, the absolute refusal to admit a mistake, the belief that he was above the consequences that governed ordinary people. Okay, I said. I picked up my phone from the counter. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. Where are you going? He asked. I am going back to Colorado, I said. My flight leaves in 3 hours. I have a job to do, and it doesn't involve watching you commit political suicide. I walked toward the door. You are leaving, he asked, his voice rising in panic. Just like that, you are abandoning me. I stopped and turned back. I am not abandoning you. I gave you the solution. You rejected it because your ego is bigger than your survival instinct. I can fight terrorists. Dad, I can fight kidnappers. I can't fight your vanity. Harper, wait. I put my hand on the doorknob. Good luck with the FBI. Senator, when they subpoena your emails, try not to look so guilty. Stop, he shouted. It wasn't a command. It was a cry. I paused. I didn't turn around. I waited. It wasn't just the image, he said. His voice was quiet, trembling. I turned slowly. He was gripping the edge of the counter so hard his knuckles were white. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the floor. What? I asked. The reason I didn't want you here, he said. The reason I sent you to boarding school, the reason I pushed you into the military, it wasn't just because you were awkward. It wasn't just because you didn't smile for the photos. He looked up. His eyes were wet. I was jealous, he whispered. I stared at him. Of all the things I expected him to say, that I was difficult, that I was cold, that I was a disappointment, this was not on the list. Jealous, I repeated. You were so free, he said, struggling with the words. Even when you were 10 years old, you didn't care what people thought. You ran around with dirt on your knees, and you didn't care if the neighbors saw. You told the truth, even when it was impolite. You had this absolute authenticity that I never had. He took a shaky breath. I have spent my entire life performing, he admitted. Every smile, every handshake, every vote, it is all calculated. It is all a mask. I don't know who I am underneath it anymore. But you always knew who you were. And I hated you for it. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. It was the sound of a 50-year-old dam breaking. I tried to break you, he said, tears spilling over. I tried to force you into the mold so you would be miserable like me, because looking at you, looking at your freedom, it made me feel like a coward. And when you joined Sentinel, when you started saving lives, you became everything I pretended to be. I play a hero on TV. You are one in real life. He slumped against the cabinets, defeated. I didn't ban you because you were a liability. Harper, he said. I banned you because you make me feel small. I stood there, my hand still resting on the doorknob, the anger I had carried for 20 years. The hot, sharp stone in my chest didn't disappear, but it changed. It lost its weight. I wasn't looking at a monster anymore. I was looking at a sad, hollow man who had traded his soul for applause and realized too late that the theater was empty. I walked back to the counter. I didn't hug him. We weren't those people. I poured myself another cup of coffee and slid it across to him. I don't need your apology, I said quietly. And I don't need your pride. He looked at the coffee, then at me. What do you need? He asked. I need you to let Chloe go. I said. He blinked. Chloe. You have spent her whole life grooming her to be the perfect accessory, I said. You pushed her to marry Julian because he looked good on paper. You made her terrified of her own voice. That ends today. I leaned forward. You are going to do the press conference, I said. You are going to read the script I write. You are going to humiliate yourself to save your career. And in exchange, you are going to stop controlling Chloe. You are going to let her live her own life. No more arranged dates. No more society pressure. If she wants to move to a farm and paint bad watercolors, you will support her. If she wants to go back to law school, you will pay for it. You will release her. He looked at me for a long time. Then he nodded. A single, decisive motion. Deal, he said. Good, I said. Now sit down. We have a speech to write. 2 hours later, Senator Whitmore stood on the steps of the manor. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still a bruised gray. A sea of microphones bristled before him. I stood to his left, wearing my black tactical jacket. A silent sentinel. Eleanor stood to his right, looking pale but resolute. My father gripped the podium. He looked straight into the cameras. My fellow Americans, he began. His voice wavered perfectly, just enough to sound broken, not enough to sound weak. I stand before you today not as a senator, but as a father who has made a terrible mistake. He followed the script word for word. He admitted to being blinded by trust. He admitted to expediting the paperwork for Julian's projects, framing it as a lapse in judgment born of a desire to see his family succeed. He apologized to his constituents. He apologized to the investors Julian had defrauded. It was a masterclass in political theater. I watched the reporters. I saw them soften. I saw the pens moving faster. They were buying it. They were buying the narrative of the tragic father betrayed by the sociopathic son-in-law. When he finished, he didn't take questions. He simply turned and walked back into the house, his arm around Eleanor. I stayed on the steps for a moment longer, looking out at the crowd. I saw Elena Russo, the journalist from the Post, standing in the front row. She caught my eye and gave me a barely perceptible nod. The story was set. The spin was locked. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. With the public narrative firmly established that Julian was a predator and the Whitmores were victims, the Department of Justice moved with aggressive speed. They didn't want to look like they were going easy on a fraudster just because he had political connections. They wanted a scalp. Julian's attempt to leverage the corruption angle fell flat. Without the physical evidence from the servers, and with his credibility destroyed by the revelation of his Ponzi scheme, his accusations against my father sounded like the desperate lies of a drowning man. The FBI treated his claims as unsubstantiated attempts to obstruct justice. 3 weeks later, Julian Thorne pleaded guilty to 14 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. The plea deal was harsh. There was no leniency. I was in the courtroom when the judge delivered the sentence. I sat in the back row, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. Chloe was not there. She was in a therapy session, finally starting the work of untangling her own mind. "Mr. Thorne," the judge said, looking down over his spectacles, "you preyed upon the trust of your investors. You exploited a prominent family for cover. Your actions were calculated, predatory, and devoid of remorse." The gavel came down. "I sentence you to 20 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole." Julian didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just slumped in his chair. As the marshals led him away, he looked back at the gallery. He scanned the faces, looking for someone, Chloe, my father, anyone. He saw me. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just watched him. The wolf watching the rat go into the cage. He looked away first. I stood up and walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Reynolds at Sentinel. "Reynolds' job well done. Whitmore, the client is asking for you. Another crisis in Beirut." I looked at the message. Then I looked at the city of Washington, D.C., stretching out before me. The monuments, the power, the lies I had mastered it all in 4 days. I had beaten them at their own game, but I didn't want to play anymore. I typed a reply. Whitmore. On my way. I put the phone in my pocket and walked toward the metro. The air felt lighter. My father was safe, but leashed by his own confession. Chloe was free. Julian was gone. And me, I was exactly where I belonged, in the shadows, moving toward the next fire. 7 days had passed since the FBI windbreakers swarmed the driveway, and the Whitmore estate had fallen into a silence so deep it felt geological. The news vans were gone, having migrated to the federal courthouse or the next scandal du jour. The broken glass in the ballroom had been swept away. The crushed wedding cake, with its tears of mockery, had been discarded. The house was pristine again, returned to its architectural perfection. But the air inside had changed. It no longer smelled of lilies and desperation. It smelled of bleach and consequences. I stood in the center of the guest room, the room that had been mine 20 years ago, and zipped up my black tactical duffel bag. I moved with the same efficiency I used in a safe house in Kabul or a bunker in Kyiv. Fold, roll, stow. My presence here was a temporary deployment, and the mission was complete. I checked the room one last time. I left nothing behind. No bobby pins on the dresser. No impression on the pillow. The wolf leaves no tracks. There was a knock on the door. It wasn't the tentative, scratching knock of the terrified girl I had spoken to on the phone a week ago. It was 3 solid raps. "Come in," I said. The door opened, and Chloe stepped inside. I paused, my hand resting on the strap of my bag. For a second, I didn't recognize her. The long, flowing blonde hair. The hair my father loved because it looked so good in campaign photos. The hair she had curled and sprayed for hours to please Julian was gone. It had been sheared off into a sharp, angular bob that framed her jawline. It made her look older. It made her look severe. It made her look like someone who had survived a crash and walked away from the wreckage. She was wearing jeans and a simple black sweater. No pearls, no pastels. "You are leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "My flight is in 2 hours," I replied. "Sentinel has a team waiting for the briefing." She nodded, walking into the room and sitting on the edge of the bed I had just stripped. She ran her hand over the bare mattress. "I didn't think you would stay," she said. "You don't belong in a museum." "Neither do you," I said. She looked up at me, and I saw a clarity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The fog of gaslighting, of trying to be the perfect doll for a sociopathic owner, had lifted. What was left was raw, tender skin, but it was healing. "I filed the annulment papers this morning," she said. "On the grounds of fraud. The lawyer said it will be fast. Julian isn't contesting it. I think he's too busy trying to trade his knowledge of Dad's zoning board deals for a lighter sentence." "He won't get a lighter sentence," I said. "The feds have the emails now. They don't need his testimony. He is useless to them." "Good," she said. She took a breath. "I am not going back to the gallery. Harper, I quit yesterday." "Oh," I leaned against the dresser, crossing my arms. "What is the plan? Paris, Tuscany, law school," she said firmly. I raised an eyebrow. "I spent 3 years signing papers I didn't read, because Julian told me they were too complicated for me," she said, her voice tightening. "I let him put debts in my name. I let him use my credit. I let him leverage my trust because I was raised to be agreeable. I was raised to be soft." She stood up, her fists clenching at her sides. "I am never going to be soft again," she continued. "I want to understand the contracts. I want to know where the money goes. I want to represent women who have been lied to by men in expensive suits. I want to be the one holding the sword, not the shield." I looked at her. The swan was dead. Something else had hatched in the ruin of the wedding. It wasn't a wolf, not yet, but it was a fighter. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out a small, heavy cardstock. It was matte black with silver lettering. "Take this," I said, handing it to her. She took it and read the name. "Evelyn Vance. Who is she?" She is the lead counsel for Sentinel Solutions, I said. She eats sharks like Julian for breakfast. She doesn't take interns, usually, but she owes me a favor from an extraction job in Jakarta. Call her. Tell her Harper sent you. Tell her you want to learn how to hunt. Chloe looked at the card, then at me. Her eyes filled with tears. But they didn't spill over. She blinked them back. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For coming back when you didn't have to. For saving me when I was too stupid to save myself. You weren't stupid, I said, hoisting my bag onto my shoulder. You were targeted. There is a difference. Now you are the target that shoots back. I walked past her toward the door. I didn't hug her. We still weren't a hugging family. But as I passed, she reached out and squeezed my arm, a firm, grounding grip. Be safe out there, she said. Safety is a myth, I replied, but I will be careful. I walked down the grand staircase, the sound of my boots echoing on the marble. The house was empty of servants. My father had let most of them go to cut costs in anticipation of the legal fees he was about to incur. I reached the foyer. The front door was open, framing the gray morning light. I walked out onto the driveway. The rain had stopped, leaving the world scrubbed clean and sharp. My rental car, a nondescript gray sedan, was waiting. I threw my bag into the passenger seat and walked around to the driver's side. Before I got in, I felt a weight on the back of my neck, the feeling of being watched. I looked up, on the second-floor balcony, standing behind the wrought iron railing, was my father. He was wearing his dressing gown. He looked small against the vast stone facade of the house he had built to intimidate the world. He wasn't waving. He wasn't smiling. He was just standing there, gripping the rail, looking down at me. He knew he couldn't come down. If he came down, he would have to be a father. He would have to say goodbye. He would have to acknowledge that I was leaving and he was staying, trapped in the cage of his own making, awaiting the subpoenas and the hearings and the slow, humiliating dismantling of his legacy. He watched me. I watched him. For the first time, there was no judgment in his eyes. There was no disappointment. There was only a quiet, somber recognition. He was looking at his equal. He was looking at the only person who had ever beaten him at his own game. I didn't wave. I simply nodded. One sharp, decisive dip of the chin. I see you. He hesitated, then nodded back. A slow, tired motion. I see you. It was the only closure we were ever going to get, and it was enough. I got into the car and slammed the door. The sound was final. I started the engine and connected my phone to the dashboard. A notification chimed. It was from my bank. Deposit received $500,000. Sender Whitmore Campaign Fund, LLC. Memo consulting fee. Crisis management. I stared at the screen. He was trying to pay me. He was trying to turn my intervention into a transaction, to balance the ledger so he wouldn't feel indebted to the daughter he had exiled. It was guilt money. It was silence money. I scoffed. A dry sound in the quiet car. Nice try, Senator, I said. I opened the banking app. I initiated a new transfer. I typed in the full amount, $500,000. Recipient: the Horizon Shelter for Domestic Abuse Survivors. In the memo line, I typed donation in the name of Chloe Whitmore. I hit confirm. The screen flashed green. Transfer complete. I felt a surge of satisfaction. I didn't want his money. I didn't want his debt. I wanted to be clean. And now, Chloe would start her new life with a legacy of helping others. Funded by the man who had failed to protect her. It was poetic justice. Another notification buzzed. This one was different. A red icon. Sentinel Solutions. I opened the message. It was from Reynolds. Status active. Location Tangier. Morocco. Objective asset retrieval. 2 NGO workers detained by local militia. High stakes. Timeline critical. Transport wheels up from Dulles in 90 minutes. I felt the familiar hum of adrenaline start to build in my chest. This was my reality. Not the country clubs, not the press conferences, not the suffocating silence of the Georgian mansion. My reality was dust and negotiation and the sharp, clear line between life and death. I put the car in gear. I drove down the long, winding driveway, past the manicured lawns, past the iron gates that had been locked against me only a week ago. I turned onto the main road. I accelerated, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror until it was just a small, gray smudge against the tree line. Then I adjusted the mirror so I could only see the road behind me. I didn't turn back. I wasn't the banished daughter anymore. I wasn't the awkward girl who didn't fit in. I was Harper Whitmore, and I had work to do. The road ahead was open, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission to travel it. They wanted a perfect wedding, and they got one. It was perfect because it burned down every lie they had built their lives on, leaving nothing but the naked, shivering truth, and the truth, as they had finally learned, is always the most expensive thing on the menu. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you have ever felt like the black sheep of your family, or if you have ever had to stand up for yourself when no one else would, I want to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I love reading your stories and connecting with you all. And if you enjoyed this journey of justice, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Family Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people who need to hear that sometimes. The outcast is the one who holds the power. See you in the next story.